So let's have a look at this headline here from CNBC. Private equity investors want their money back, but it's tied up in zombie funds. So let me see if I can unpack what the real story is behind this headline. Now, private equity firms are investors that invite funding from other large institutional investors, such as pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, many kinds of asset management firms. These investors, these asset management firms, are willing to commit capital, quite sizable amounts of capital, to the fund itself, the private equity fund, which is managed by what are called general partners, and the investors, like the pension funds and so on, are called limited partners. Now, the model basically for the private equity fund is to invest in companies, private companies. These are not companies listed on exchanges and so on. They invest capital. They very often take on sizable amounts of debt. In other words, they're leveraging these firms. They make changes in the management. They can realign the corporate strategy and so on. And the intention then is to sell these companies on to other investors, maybe another private equity firm even, for a profit. And then the investors, the limited partners, as I mentioned, would then benefit from a distribution, what's called a distribution, which is where the PE firm, the private equity firm, pays out the proceeds. The investors, the limited partners, commit capital for usually 7+ years. They know it's an illiquid investment, but they do believe that they will ultimately be provided with liquidity. But what makes this topical is that these PE firms are not nearly as successful or doing as well as they have done previously. Now, this ties into something else, which is that President Trump has recently decided to pass an executive order allowing retail investors the opportunity, note I've put that in inverted commas, to hold private equity investments in their 401k retirement plans. But it's also quite relevant to point out, as the Financial Times does, this follows heavy lobbying by private capital groups such as Apollo Global Management, BlackRock, which see access to these retirement plans as a path to drawing in hundreds of billions of dollars in lucrative assets. It's not too conspiratorial here to think that one of the ways that these PE firms are going to get an exit is by being able to essentially shunt off some of these poor zombie type investments onto the retail market, in other words, the 401k investors. If you find this kind of material interesting, please check out my YouTube channel. Here it is, the Corcoran Codex, and thank you for watching.